Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm pleased to follow the honourable member for Congleton. It's enlightening for me listening to her because she lists a huge array of things where the government are now going to be spending a lot more money, all very good causes and absolute benefit to the people of our country. The one problem I've got listening to the honourable lady and all honourable members opposite is that we don't have any money left. We've spent it all. After the pandemic, £500 billion had to be spent on that. No one's mentioned that, I notice. We are effectively running on tick. We are living beyond our means. We're spending money we don't have. And all that we're doing, all laudable though it may be, to spend the money we're discussing today, all that we are doing, Madam Deputy Speaker, is handing huge debts to future generations. So I have to remind members opposite that every Labour government we have ever had in my lifetime has left this country with higher debt, more unemployment and an economy in a worse state. And I would also remind honourable members opposite that in 1979, that is when, after years of failed socialist government, we finished up having to rebuild the economy with a Prime Minister then who had the determination to do what was right for our country, which led to years of prosperity after those economic reforms. Yes, I'll certainly give way.
First of all, it sounds like he's giving up on Britain. He seems to say there's no point in trying to find a better future for ourselves because there's no money left, and they've left us no money. But also, will he also recognise that the level of debt that was left in this country after the end of this Conservative administration was twice that was left in 2010 by the Labour government?
Forgets about the costs of the pandemic and the associated costs of that. And the reality is, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we have to create the wealth before we spend it. And I've heard for many years members opposite talk about how to spend money. I very rarely hear how we actually create the wealth that we need to spend on our public services, and that's where it all goes wrong. So, no, I won't give way. Madam Deputy Speaker, so the Chancellor, hearing her yesterday, she paints a dire picture of our country's future. Under Labour, it is not the economy that is booming, rather it is the size of the state with an ever-increasing burden of taxation on working people. Under this government, it is not, in my constituency, businessmen of Romford who are being supported for future success of their enterprise, but it's the climate alarmist with a public energy company that will not even produce any energy. How sensible is that, Madam Deputy Speaker? It is not the young family in areas like Collier Row or the pensioner in Rush Green, both in my constituency, who are being supported, for example, but a decrease in stamp duty or help with energy payments, but rather, of course, it's the union bosses who are able to deliver overinflated pay rises to the public sector. And of course, the private sector is once again paying for that. Despite the government's talk of growth, this budget is preparing us for the return of the dark days of the 1970s, with hard-working people paying the price. Indeed, they are also lacking in their aspiration for this country, that they do not only want the Office of Budget Responsibility to mark their homework, it seems to me that they want the OBR to do their homework completely, even gifting the OBR more powers, as was outlined in the King's speech. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, Britain's potential is far greater, in my view, than a high-tax, low-growth and dysfunctional big state. Far from giving up on Britain, as the honourable member said a moment ago. Quite the opposite. I love this country, I believe in this country, and I hate to see what socialism has done to this country over the years, always ending in a worse situation than they started. And it's always, Madam Deputy Speaker, Conservative governments that have to come in and pick up the pieces and restore the economy back to prosperity and vibrancy again. And in 5 years' time, I'm sure we will have to do the same. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is now clear that under this Labour government, the British people face a tyranny of taxation. Not content with the record-breaking tax burden, which is already existing, Labour is adding to the load on the shoulders of hard-working people. Under Labour, it will be harder than ever to buy a property. For my constituents in Romford, who are lucky enough to own their own home, their journey to work is going to be even more expensive than it is already under the control of the Mayor of London, Mr Khan, with the rise in bus fares. When you get to work, my constituents will take home far less in their pay packet due to the increase in national insurance paid by employers, of course passed to employees. That's clearly what's going to happen. Nothing but a stealth tax by this supposedly transparent Labour government. It's job destroying. I've already had businesses on to me in my constituency telling me that they won't be employing people because of this increase, this reckless increase in national insurance. And you might even lose your job. My constituents, all of our constituents, will lose their jobs as businesses struggle. They will lose their jobs as businesses struggle with the national insurance increase. The costs of this will be phenomenal, and the growth-crushing capital gains tax increase, in addition, that's also going to have a big impact. Then, as if that wasn't all enough, when you sadly pass away, the Labour government wants to make it even harder to pass on what someone has earned throughout their life to their loved ones, through expanding inheritance tax to pensions and so on. You know, I think it's incredibly cruel to do that, and I think that paying tax throughout your life and then paying more tax when you die, really, is that the kind of thing that a Labour government should be doing? It's really going to harm a lot of families who will inherit and will not be able to because the cash grab from this particular budget. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, this government, I don't believe, is pro-worker at all. It cannot even define what a worker is. Labour used to be the party of the state from cradle to grave. Now it seems to be the party of taxing my Essex constituents from cradle to grave and beyond. It's been a very Essex-weighted debate today with my honourable friends from Epping Forest, from North Essex, from Malden, I think Harlow, honourable gentleman over and others. And it is the very people in my county of Essex who are very, very disillusioned by all this, because they're aspirational, they're hard-working, they're market traders, you know, they're small business people. They're going to be devastated by all of this, and I do warn members opposite that they're going to find this out when they next knock on some doors in the constituencies that they represent. As Margaret Thatcher warned us, any government that imposes... Well, she did rescue our country's economy. Let's be honest about this. She really did, and we're still benefiting today from the reforms that she introduced. So, as Margaret Thatcher said, any government that imposes high taxation is taking power away from the people and giving itself power over the people. Of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, taxation at some level is always necessary. It has to be in place to support our nation's armed forces, supporting families, protecting pensioners and investing in necessary infrastructure and public services for the future. But what is this Labour government doing with all of this hard-earned money that the working people of this country have created? I think they're going to be spending billions of pounds on things that will go to waste. I mean, to give an example, OK, I will give way, yes.
Under the previous government of dodgy PPE contracts that actually didn't go to be spent on PPE. Don't you think that's the sort of waste that our government should be clawing back?
I have to say, I agree with him. The last government wasted a huge amount of money. And no wonder, no, they did. And no wonder we lost the election. But this is actually not a political point. This is about how we run the country effectively and efficiently. My honourable friend from North Essex made a whole range of very, very serious points about how we're going to survive as a country. You cannot keep spending money like this. It doesn't work. In the end, Future generations will suffer because of it. The last government failed, but this government is going way further. This simply is all unaffordable, and I do worry about the future of our country if we can't see where this will eventually lead. So, the Labour government are spending billions of pounds on a renewable energy company which will not produce any energy, another vanity project. They are spending billions of pounds on public sector wage hikes. They are pouring even more taxpayers' money into public services with virtually no concrete productivity targets. Of course I will.
Member for giving way. Does he not accept that those pay rises are actually going to hard-working people who are in themselves taxpayers?
Look, we have to live within our means. I don't object to money being spent wisely and sensibly. Of course I don't. That's the role of any government that is in power, to ensure that the money we spend goes to where it's really needed in our country. The problem I've got is that all this is unaffordable, and we are, I think it is about 100% of GDP in debt. Now, that's the highest it's ever been in our entire history. You can't go on doing this. Eventually, this will all come crashing down, and all of us in this House who let this happen without speaking out, as I'm doing today, we will all have to take responsibility when future generations have to pick up the pieces, because we can't afford the debts we're getting into. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, if hard-working people are being taxed, they rightly expect money to be put to good use to boost infrastructure. Local services and economic growth is what we should be focusing, not ideological consumption. Again, the people of Romford, my constituency, and throughout the borough of Havering and throughout the county of Essex will be rightly outraged that there is so much unfairness, particularly in regards to local government funding. The funding formula hasn't been addressed, from what I can see, in this budget. And this is a very serious issue in the London Borough of Havering, which is where my constituency is based. Despite the greatest example of tax and spend that I can ever remember since I've been an MP, nothing has been done to address this very serious problem. So the funding formula is unfair, outdated, and it is discriminatory and fails to address local demographic shifts. Local people, businesses and public services are the bedrock of our economy and are facing acute financial pressures in my constituency. They deserve an ambitious programme of reform so that the money we are paying in can be spent on our local services, instead of closing down libraries, closing down facilities, which my local council is now engaging in, necessarily, sadly so, because of the lack of funding. Although I do believe that it's about priorities, and my local council shouldn't be closing libraries, but at the end of the day, we are not being funded fairly, and the government really needs to address this, because if local services are not being provided, then people are going to be very angry, very disillusioned, and local communities will be harmed. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I speak not only for Essex and the surrounding London boroughs, but for all hard-working people across the length and breadth of this country, when I say that the United Kingdom has no place in being a high-tax, low-growth and low-aspiration nation. If the Chancellor wants to see growth, I encourage her to look to the nations whose economies are expanding much faster compared to the sluggish and rather depressing growth forecasts she outlined only yesterday. Whether they be in North America, Asia or Europe, the formula of some of these countries is the same. Low taxes that give the people back the money that is rightly theirs, policies that incentivise enterprise and growth in the economy, and a lean state with minimal regulation. Investment is critical in infrastructure, and truly local public services, of course, are vital for local people, and these create a basis also for private investment. So, in Britain, cutting red tape and reaping the benefits of Brexit, if taken advantage of, we really should be doing this, they will attract booming business and stimulate success. The mantra of the state should not be, the mantra that the state should be managed decline needs to be rejected. The British people deserve better than this. I therefore, Madam Deputy Speaker, encourage the government not to follow the examples of the failed Labour governments that are listed throughout history, but rather than the nation-saving policies that were embarked upon in 1979 by a Prime Minister who had the vision of a greater Britain and a more prosperous United Kingdom. We must pursue an agenda for low taxes, economic growth and an efficient state that improves public services, that look after the elderly and those truly in need. The people of this country do not want and simply cannot afford a return to red-blooded socialism, discriminating against hard-working people, decimating our economy, destroying jobs, curtailing growth and restricting freedom. The British people need a small state that works, not a bloated state that holds our country back.